understand APIs a little better. So this is a typical uh, API documentation that you will come across in different applications. This particular case, this documentation is of Stripe. Stripe is a payment gateway, one of the most popular payment gateways in the world, right? So as a product manager, you will come across such API documentation a lot of times. You can see the topics here, you can see the core resources here, you can see the payment methods here, you can see billing, you can see connect. It's one of the better designed documentation, I must say. And on the right side, you can see the different languages. So you can see Curl, you can see Ruby, you can see Python, you can see PHP, Node, etc. So let me just take you through each one of these things one by one. Okay. So what's really happening here is Stripe's developers created interfaces or created ways to use their product or their software, which is Stripe, without getting bothered. So if today I have to create something using Stripe's using Stripe's capabilities, I don't have to connect or talk to their developers. I simply have to look at their documentation of their APIs, think of it as a manual, and understand how different operations, how different actions can be taken. Okay. So for example, the introduction is very simple, where they have mentioned that the Stripe API is organized around REST. REST is a kind of a protocol um, for designing API. Think of it like a framework for APIs. Okay. So our API is predictable, resource-oriented URLs and uses HTTP response codes to indicate API errors. We use built-in HTTP features like HTTP authenticator, authentication, HTTP verbs, blah 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 blah. These are all different terminologies. These are all technical stuff. So, for example, predictable resource-oriented URLs. That basically is a good best practice for you for designing APIs. When you're designing APIs, you would want the URL to be predictable. So if you're asking for balance, for example, you want to detect the balance of a particular customer, the ideal way, the URL should say something like /balance, right? Then it is easy to remember. Just like when you have a website and you want to go to its contact us page, it will be great if the contact us page is /contact us, or checkout is simply /checkout, right? If it's anything funky, it will be not so easy to discover or to predict, right? That is what it's saying. It's just a best practice. Uses a HTTP response code. So when the response is coming back to the client, if the codes are appropriate, for example, there are well-established codes like 200 is considered 200 is considered as okay, that everything is okay, the response has been received. While 404 is well known as the absence of a resource, that you requested something which is not there. 500 is a HTTP code which is meant for server not working or server crashed. So it's a problem at the backend. So backend was not able to process the information, process the request that you just said, that sent, and it just was not able to process. But on the top of it, it crashed. So that is why 500, the server bad. So the request was the request went bad at the server end. Okay. Anyway, so these are all the other technical stuff that we can get into, but I just want to quickly tell you some stuff about on the right side that's happening. So these are the different languages, and it's simply telling you that the base URL is this in different languages, number one. And this, because developers who might be using Node, might be using Java, might be using PHP, etc., in the backend. And as you can see, these are all backend technologies. These are all backend scripting languages, okay, application languages. And the example request here is, if you're using Node, the example request is going to look like this. Var Stripe. Now, I'm not going to go deeper into what's var here and so on, because that requires understanding of Node language as such. But var, in this particular case, var is variable. So a variable Stripe has been instantiated, which requires Stripe. So Stripe must be some SDK or something, some code, some framework or some plugin that has been installed. And this is some validation or some key like the example below. See, you can also set up for request key like in the example below here. is often useful for connect applications that use multiple API keys during the lifetime of a process. So if you're also testing the system and you're also you're running a live system, then you might need to use different keys for different connections so that the right thing is handled. Authentication is transparently handled for you in subsequent method calls on the returned object. So return object was this, which is stripe charges retrieve. So retrieve the charges for this particular connection. The API key is this. Okay. So these are the status codes that I was mentioning. The 200 is okay, 400 is bad request. The request itself was unacceptable. Basically, some required parameter was missing. 401 was unauthorized, so the API key was not valid. 402 is request failed. So this, if you at all end up designing APIs, which there's a good chance you might end up designing APIs. It's typically the job of a developer, but these things actually, if you are an API developer, if you're into a company where APIs are the mainstay, like the payment company or a lot of other companies, you will have to design all of these, right? You'll have to design. So this is pretty straightforward. This is pretty much standard. You don't even have to tell the developer to do this. Uh, but which parameters are required, which parameters are not required, etc., etc. You might have a say in that. Okay. So how easy or how difficult do you want the APIs to fail? For example, that's something that you would want to govern. 404, 409, 429, 500 to 504. These are all HTTP status codes which are well established in the industry, right? What kind of errors that can come in? So this again is something that you have a say in. That what exactly should the error say? How easy it should be to understand the error, right? And this is the if you're using Node language, this is how the errors can be handled or coded in. Okay, the example request as we're going through, right? So this is a typical how any documentation is going to look like. Okay, for example, if we just go to balance, right? So if I want this is an object representing your Stripe balance, you can retrieve it to see the balance currently on your Stripe account. So by coding it in my system, in my application, I can actually just retrieve the balance from Stripe seamlessly, and I can show that in the user's profile later very easily. And because as a product manager, I know that Stripe provides this endpoint. This is called an endpoint, by the way. Because it provides certain endpoint where I can retrieve the balance, I can actually include it in my front end. I can include it in the user's profile or user's account because I know that Stripe has this endpoint. If Stripe doesn't have this endpoint, then including that will be very costly at my end because I'll have to create a complete wallet at my end which will store the information about the particular user and I can then show it. So now it becomes a costly affair. But if I know that Stripe provides this, then it becomes as simple as just calling Stripe and asking him that, hey, can you give me the balance of this particular user, right? So what is a balance object? Now I'm getting into the realm of software engineering and stuff, but to object, if you remember the object-oriented design and thinking, this is exactly that object. Okay, so balance is an object here. It's a string. It's available in the form of array. It's available as an array. Then connect result, live mode, pending, blah blah blah, something, whatever. The final response would look like this. Object is balance, available is currency CAD, which is Canadian dollars, I think. Amount is this much, source type is card, Bitcoin receiver, bank account. Similarly, all the other currencies and what all it exists. Right? Connect result, currency, amount, blah blah blah. This is how it looks like. A balance transaction object also exists within the balance resource. Okay, so there's a balance object, there's a balance transaction object, which is the if you have to transact around the balance, this is the object that you have to take care of, that you have to use. Similarly, retrieve balance and retrieve a balance transaction. These are all the different transactions that can happen, and these are the different objects that can happen. Okay, so I hope this makes it easier to understand what APIs are. So with the account object, right? Uh, and to retrieve all of this information, all you have to do is you have to send an authenticated request to this particular base URL. All the resources that we're talking about below, the payouts, the products, and everything, this will get appended to this. Okay, slash account slash whatever slash whatever. Okay, and depending on which language it is, you can jump to PHP and you can see the entire code will change to match the PHP request. Give it some time because it's a lot of things. Yeah, see, now it is, this is PHP's syntax. Okay, this is all PHP syntax. See, this is all PHP syntax. This one, example request. Earlier it was var stripe equal to request. Now it has changed to something that PHP understands. Okay. So this is how a typical API documentation is going to look like, and it's worthwhile as a product manager to deep dive into API documentation, understand the endpoints that exist, because that will help you understand what are the capabilities that you can easily leverage and provide a much superior experience for the clients, for the end user. That's it for now.